Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Symmetrically Fit. My name's Dustin Gotro with Symmetry Personal Training, and I've got Dylan Stone, the DMI guy, back with me today. So before we get started, welcome back, Dylan, first of all.
Oh
And
yeah, it's great to be back.
congratulations to Dylan. Yeah, welcome back. Congratulations to Dylan for buying a house. That's exciting stuff.
Yep. And if you can tell from the camera
Uh,
angle, I'm sitting on the ground in one of my rooms in my house. So,
Still working on the furniture part.
yep, furniture is going to come later. So,
Yeah, that's cool. That's exciting stuff. I'm sure you're probably ready for the process of it to be over with at this point.
so many papers, so much stuff, but at least I'm here in it. So, yeah.
Yep, you got it. All right, guys. So, um, the way it's going to work today, I want to kind of work this into a conversation with Dylan and I because we've been friends for so long and we've been close friends, and we've had many conversations over the years about the topics we're going to cover today. So, we're going to kind of do some of it like that. A lot of it, you guys will notice there's going to be parts where I'm going to be staring at this outline that I have in front of me on my screen and reading off of it. The reason I want to do that is what we're going to talk about today. I've been thinking about for a long, long time, and I've been kind of playing it over and over again in my head. Every day it's been on my mind. And I want to make sure things come out the way that I've been thinking about them. So the points really get across, and it hopefully will really help you guys, a lot of you. So there are going to be some parts that I'm going to read straight off of my screen simply because I know I spent a lot of time sitting there wording it exactly the way that I think it needs to come out to really get through to you guys. So bear with me on that. So what we're going to discuss is something that I think everybody on the planet needs to hear, and at least learn a little bit more about and kind of realize some things. So I'm going to share my experience. Dylan's going to share his experience, and I'm going to share a lot of my story that a lot of you guys may not know when it comes to anxiety and depression. And in this case, how those things have related to my fitness and the things that I've realized over the last 3 to 5 years that I think can really change things for you guys. Some of this stuff has just been completely life changing for me. It's so much different than it was several years ago. So uh, I really hope that what we're covering today can help some of you guys kind of gain a new perspective when it comes to how you deal with anxiety and depression. So first thing, before we get to any of that, I want to put out a full disclaimer, and I'm going to get into more detail on this later, but very first thing, if you are struggling with anxiety and depression, you absolutely have to see a doctor. That needs to be the first step. At the very least, I know, you guys know this about me. I'm not big on prescription medications. I'm going to get into more detail on that later personally. But the fact is, we need to at least get the information from the doctors, get the opinion, get several opinions if you need it, and make an educated decision. This can be very, very serious stuff. It needs to be handled by an actual physician. So, Dylan, I know you had something you wanted to kind of talk about on that point.
Sure. So, yes, I agree with you completely, Dustin, that going to a physician is um, needs to be a very early step in your process if you feel like you're dealing with what we're about to talk about. One thing I will say, and Dustin and I are probably going to get into this in both of our stories because we've struggled with this personally in the past, is that in the catch 22 of it is that when you're depressed, you don't want to seek anybody. Is that you need the help, but you're just so down and depressed that you just don't want to seek it. So I think one huge resource that gets overlooked is talking to someone who's been in therapy before. Talking to a friend who's been in therapy before is because they can give you the real down low on what to expect in therapy, what to expect when you tell your doctor you're feeling down and depressed, what to expect, in the next months and weeks to come. So yes, you should reach out to a doctor, but if you don't feel like you're there, then talk to a friend who's been through this kind of thing and really get their idea on how it goes. But I'll break down a little bit what we're talking about medically, and then Dustin and I had this conversation. We want this to be very much about our stories and not very much scientific, so I'll be quick here. So we talk about three different types of depression. The first one is situational depression. So that would be if the family dog dies and you're depressed for a couple months, right? That is a very real response, a very accurate response to having a family member die, a dog die, something like that. But eventually we get over that, right? The next would be seasonal affective disorder, adequately called SAD, right? And so that is, to a very lesser extent, it's what some people call the Sunday scaries, right? When they're dreading going back to work on Monday. But more so, it would be, when it goes with seasons, right? And so summer is a great season of happiness and joy, and we get to play around. And then once fall and winter come, people spend more time indoors and not as much time in the sun, and people get kind of depressed because of that. So it goes with the seasons, seasonal affective disorder. And then the final one is probably one that Dustin and I are going to talk about a lot, is called major depressive disorder, MDD. That is where either you are just in a constant state of depression and loneliness and despair, or you go through cycles, right? And so probably once every month, or it could be whatever your cycle is, once every month you have this week where you're just super down and super depressed. So those are really the three things we're talking about. One thing that's very much associated with MDD is anxiety disorder and OCD, like Dustin was talking about. So we see those two things co-occurring a lot in our patients. In terms of treatment for this, we as medical professionals go with a three-pronged approach. So the first is medication. So if someone is truly depressed, it's an imbalance in the neurotransmitters in your brain, right? So it's a biological response to become depressed, right? And so to get us out of that depression initially is going to be some sort of medication to rebalance our neurotransmitters in our brain. With that said, that's only one of the three prongs. So I'm very much in line with Dustin, where we don't want to be on medication for 30, 40 years plus, right? That's to get ourselves balanced, and then we move on to the other two prongs, which the next one is therapy, right? Specifically RBT therapy, which is response behavior therapy. It's a specific type of therapy, and if you're looking for a therapist, look to see if they're RBT trained. It's shown to be very effective with patients with depression. So that's when you kind of learn those coping mechanisms to deal with those sad emotions in the future, right? And then the third one is physical exercise. So the we can get into the neurotransmitters and whatnot, but when you exercise, you release dopamine, and dopamine does all these different things. I could go on a 40-minute rant about all these different things that dopamine does, but suffice it to say that exercise, specifically exercise longer than 30 minutes, will help release that dopamine and get us feeling better, get us into a better mental state. So just a recap, the way we look at it is if we're feeling down and depressed, the initial treatment we need to do is we need to get on medication to get ourselves rebalanced. And then while we're on medication, we start learning those coping mechanisms in therapy. So eventually we can get off medication and just have our coping mechanisms. So that is how we approach it medically. But now I want to get more into Dustin's and my story.
Awesome. That's all great information. I want to kind of touch back on the point you made, dealing with depression, just because a lot of my story is going to be related to anxiety and OCD, just because that's what I struggle with the most. But the point you made about people not wanting to talk when they're dealing with depression, I think that really needs to get out there. That I know for me, it was always this feeling like I was the only one, like I was weird or different, and we want to kind of get the word out there and make sure you guys know you're not. It's a lot of people, and we see this with our clients and patients. It's so incredibly common now for people to struggle with these things, and that's kind of the big reason I wanted to get into all this stuff. Um, so anxiety and depression has become such a prevalent thing and such a common topic of conversation. It's like I see it everywhere. I mean, I don't know that I have a single client that the conversation hasn't come up at some point. It just it seems like everybody is struggling with it, and so um, it, I want to kind of share through my experiences. I've really learned over the last 3 to 5 years. I've learned some really interesting things as pertains to exercise psychology. So essentially, the effect on my anxiety and depression since I have gotten my fitness under control, and how those two they really affect each other. That's a lot of what I want to get into today. So I'm really excited to share with you guys today. I will say, kind of touching back on not wanting to talk about it, I'm already getting shaky and nervous just leading up to it. It's hard. This is hard for me to talk about this kind of stuff. It's you spend your whole life kind of in your head about it and seeing these things as weakness, and then so to get out here and talk about it, it's tough. It's hard to do because it's hard to forget the fact that you've been feeling like this is a weakness in your character your entire life. So bear with me. I'm gonna try and get through this best I can. So first off, Dylan, just give a brief little bit of experience that you've had with anxiety and depression, and maybe even related into fitness, since that's kind of where you and I started our relationship.
Sure. So, one thing I will say, Dustin, about talking about it and it being difficult to talk about, it's the way that a therapist put it to me is that it's ripping a band-aid off, right? And so if you rip a band-aid off and you put it back on, you rip it off again, put it back on, it's going to get easier every time you rip the band-aid off, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why I jump at every opportunity to talk about it, because the more I talk about it, the easier it gets. And hopefully, I get out there and
Yeah.
reach some people. So a little bit about my story. So I, um, I was very much brought up in the, boys don't show emotion kind of culture. And I don't think anyone ever told me that, but it was just, just the friends that I had around me and things like that, where I just kind of assumed that, oh, boys don't have emotion. That's a girl thing, right? Which, please don't make that a soundbite, because it sounds horrible saying it non-sarcastically. But so I had all these, emotions that I didn't know how to deal with, and ultimately, things happened in my life, and I got extremely depressed, and I attempted suicide August 27th, 2014, which, if you see the recording date, we're just about 10 years from that. So I'm making my 10-year anniversary. I'm going to do something cool for my 10-year survival date. So um, so after my suicide attempt, I was went into an inpatient mental facility for 10 days, where I got really good at jigsaw puzzles, and more than that, I definitely learned a lot of the coping mechanisms, and that's where I was introduced to the three-pronged approach. So I got put on medication, and to mention that medications are hit and miss. So there's a whole number of medications that address depression in a different way, and if you feel like you're on a medication that's not working well, ask your psychiatrist or your doctor about switching medications, because there has to be a medication that responds to your brain chemistry. And if one doesn't, then, well, okay, let's go try another one, right? So I went through two medications and then we finally found one that worked for me. I was doing that, the medication and the therapy, for 5 years. Note, I didn't include that third prong, so I only had two prongs of my three here, and the effectiveness was there, but it wasn't as much as it could be. And then enter Dustin. So I went to a CrossFit gym that Dustin was working at, and started exercising, and then that's when I kind of finally got my triangle or my three prongs all lined up, and things started looking up. But suffice to say, over that 10 years, there are ups and downs, right? And I have, so, I can confidently say and without shame say I have major depressive disorder. So that one where it goes up and down, up and down. And so there are times when I still feel those dark feelings, but it's about utilizing the coping mechanisms I found in therapy, speaking with people with big beards like Dustin, and Santa. So, but speaking with friends, keeping that friend base up, and really staying on top of your coping mechanisms. Because if you start falling off, it's a slippery slope. So that's where I am right now. It's not something that you just get over and get past. It's something that you continually work at throughout your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's definitely a constant battle. So I want to go over, this is a part I'm going to pretty much read off the screen. I want to go over my stance on medication for anxiety and depression. The reason I want to go over this is because it relates to the point that I'm trying to make that helped me personally realize some things. So, the topics we're going to go over today are absolutely 100% not a replacement for medication. Okay, just to say that one more time, the first step needs to be see a doctor and see if there needs to be some medication. Okay, you must work with a doctor and make an educated decision when it comes to any type of medication. My scope of practice is in fitness, so I can only speak to my own the effects of exercise on these conditions for myself personally, right? So this is my personal experience and how exercise affected me. It's not necessarily saying it's going to affect you the same way. I do believe it will, but again, it's not a replacement. It's kind of an addition to. It's an extra bonus. Some things that you can work on yourself to improve your situation, right? So, um, just to put it out there, my personal opinion on medication, based on the things that I'm going to talk about in my story, are that I think we all need to find a balance of working with a doctor, finding the right medications. My personal opinion is the minimum amount of medication that we can be on and be stable and be happy where we need to be. But we need to find a balance between that and doing the things that we can be doing to improve the situation, right? I'm just not a fan of people expecting to go be able to just take some magic pill and all of a sudden anxiety and depression just goes away. It's just not how it works. We have to be working on things, as Dylan keeps mentioning, the coping skills is extremely important. You have to learn how to cope with it, because the fact is it's probably not ever going to go away. You have to learn to deal with it. You have to learn to manage it. And I can speak to that when it comes to anxiety, which we're about to get into big time. So um, that's kind of where I'm at with all of that. So Dylan, what has been your experience as you started to introduce that third prong and we started getting into fitness? What was your experience? How did that affect your anxiety slash depression?
Yeah. So if you look at the timeline, when I started getting that third prong, the exercise, I was unaware of the chemical changes that are making in my body, like the dopamine release and all that. But I more so just looked at it from the top down and saw that, Dustin, you remember these? We worked out every morning at 5 a.m. It doesn't have to be 5 a.m. everybody, so don't
Yes, it
take
does.
this as my sponsorship of getting up at 5 a.m. just to defeat your depression, because sleep is also important, but that's another prong that we're gonna, or another spin-off that we're gonna do. But so my point is a routine, right? And so routines are extremely important, as we've mentioned in multiple podcast episodes before, is getting into that routine and exercising. It doesn't even have to be a crazy exercise. And that's something that I wish I would have known when we started, Dustin, because probably a fact of us doing CrossFit, and CrossFit is only insane exercises. But if you are in a depressed state, it could be a 30-minute walk. that's exercise, right? It elevates the heart rate enough to get that dopamine release, right? 30-minute walk. There you go. So if because the cruel thing about depression is that you have no motivation. And so if it's too much to drive to the gym or even roll out to get to your garage gym and lift weights or get on a treadmill, 30-minute walk. That's it. You just got to step outside, do a 30-minute walk. So um, that's kind of how it relates to, addressing depression. One, it helps with your schedule, it helps you stay on a schedule. And two, it also has that chemical release of the dopamine that helps with everything.
Yep, we're definitely going to get into routines. That's part of this whole thing we're going to talk about a lot. So I want to mention this because if I don't, every time I get in my car and get in traffic, I'm going to keep getting irritated about it until I get it off my chest. So we're gonna mention this. This idea of this podcast came into my head months ago as I was driving, and it started as I wanted to talk about patience, and then it developed into an entirely different topic. But I do want to mention the patience thing. So this started when I was driving in my car one day, and because of where I'm at now as opposed to where I used to be, as I'm driving, I notice. So, Dylan, how often would you say when you're driving, you see somebody that is irritated driving erratically because they're ticked off or honking horns? How often do you see that when you're driving?
4 times per hour,
Yeah, at least, right? It's
at least. Yeah.
everybody, and then that's what brought the idea into my head. I started noticing, like, when I stop at a stoplight, I'll look around and it's like every single person I see looks pissed off. Everybody just looks so miserable. And I realized it's a patience thing. Everybody's in such a rush all the time and so impatient that it makes you absolutely miserable. And I recognize this because I used to have a lot of trouble with patience. I still do. I'm not perfect, even though a lot of people like Dylan think I am. I'm not. I still struggle with patience, but it's changed a lot. It's gotten so much better. And I've realized that being impatient and always being in a rush made me absolutely miserable and irritable all the time. And it affected a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And that's kind of what led me into the rest of what we're going to talk about today is realizing that I've changed so much. And now when I drive, I'm not irritated. I'm not in a rush. So I wanted to mention that part mainly because I want to remind everybody out there we all need to slow the heck down, slow everything down, take a breath, leave earlier if you have to, quit rushing all the time. It's driving you absolutely insane. It's making you miserable and it's affecting everything around you. It's affecting yourself. It's affecting your relationships. It's a miserable way to live. You got to slow down and enjoy life a little bit and stop rushing everywhere. Right. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's kind of like a side topic because this thing kind of developed into an entirely different thing that I want to get to. So, um, getting into my story, it always goes back to me. I'll never forget this night. So when I was in high school, I think it was my sophomore year, somewhere around there. I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I could never, and you guys will relate to this because I know a lot of people have this problem. I could not shut my brain down at night. It just would not shut down. It was running a million miles an hour. It didn't matter what I did. I mean, I tried meditation, I tried everything, and I just couldn't calm my mind down. It just kept going and going, and it got to the point where it just became extremely frustrating, and I started to experience some real serious feelings of anger, and I would get so angry. And one night it was somewhere around 11 o'clock at night. I know that's not super late for a lot of you, but since I was in high school, I went to bed at about 7 o'clock. That's just always the way I've been. I go to bed early. So I'm up, 4 or 5 hours past when I was trying to go to sleep. And I got so angry that I couldn't go to sleep that I literally started punching myself in the head. And it was like a light bulb for me. I just realized like this is a serious problem. This is not right. And so I broke down. I went and knocked on my parents' door. I went in their room and they're like freaked out, wondering what's wrong. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm miserable. I can't sleep. I can't shut my mind off. I don't know what to do. And so over the next couple of weeks, we went to a psychiatrist. They ended up putting me on Adderall at the time, which I took through the rest of high school. Um, for me, the Adderall, I guess I can say it did help me focus, but it didn't really fix much of anything. I think a lot of it was more psychological. Um, and so it was just kind of in my head. I knew I was taking a medication, so I thought that it was helping me, but in reality, I don't think it was doing a whole lot for me. And so that was the rest of high school. I still struggled with anxiety, a little bit of depression, but the depression really didn't start until a little bit later on in the process. Um, so after that breakdown, as I got out of high school, I ended up going back to doctors, and I ended up on anxiety medication. And so it started with Xanax and then switched over to Klonopin. That was for about 16 years. I was medicated with benzos. So um, I would say that that definitely helped with the anxiety in a way. I personally would say it numbed it. It didn't really fix anything. It just sedated me to the point where I wasn't as worried and wound up all the time about it. Um, I don't think it made a whole lot of difference on the depression. I went over that 16 years. I was on and off of different antidepressants. Some helped, some didn't, but nothing really fixed it. It was like I was constantly chasing it. I drank fairly heavily for several years, trying to, I guess, self medicate for that. That didn't work. Other substances, things like that. I tried everything to just feel normal. I just wanted to feel normal, and I didn't. Nothing fixed it. And so went through that 16 years. I began my career as a fitness professional at 19 years old. And what was interesting is, though I was teaching, uh, real lifestyle change and teaching people to change their habits and get fit and worry about their health, I still couldn't seem to ever be consistent with anything, like anything in my life, not just fitness. I just wasn't a consistent person. I was always the guy that would commit to something and then fall off a month later. I never could follow through with anything. With my fitness, I never stayed on a meal plan consistently. I never worked out consistently. I'd get going for a month or two and then fall off and back and forth and back and forth. And it kind of started to wear away on me, and I think that's a lot of why I ended up leaving the fitness industry for a little while, because honestly I felt kind of like a fraud. Like I was trying to teach people to change their life in a way that I had no clue how to do myself, and that wears away on you after a while. So um, after that 16 years, I kind of just decided, and this was about, I guess, 3.5 years ago now. After that, I decided that the medication I was taking was not treating the actual problem. It wasn't fixing anything. I still didn't feel right. Um, I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with depression. I couldn't sleep right, and I was miserable and irritable all the time. That the being miserable and irritable, I think, were the two that really did it for me. I didn't want to be irritable anymore. I'm married now. I have kids, and it's like I couldn't be the husband or the father that I really wanted to be because I was so irritable that I was making everybody else around me irritable. And it really started to wear away on me. So I just finally got to the point where I was ready to try something different. And so that's where I kind of began my long, rough journey of getting off of the benzo medications. And honestly, my entire life was flipped upside down at that point. Everything that I thought I knew changed. My entire life changed. Eventually for the better. Initially, it was rough, but eventually it did change for the better. So I do want to mention here. I want to make sure this is clear before I forget to put it out there. I I did get off of benzo medications. I am still medicated, just different types of medications. I personally I wanted to get off of benzos simply because it altered my state of mind in a way that I didn't feel comfortable with. I felt like it was changing who I was. It was changing my personality, and I didn't like that. I wanted to feel like myself again, even if that meant I've got to go back and figure out how to deal with all these things that I've never really learned how to cope with. And so that's kind of where I went and found a really good psychiatrist that was willing to help me get off the medications and look at some different options. And he's been absolutely incredible. Still working with him today. So that's kind of where the whole journey started. So the process of coming off. So my initial recovery for my nervous system, as I came off the medications, my nervous system went absolutely hyperactive on me. My anxiety shot out the roof, blood pressure went up. I was having panic attacks all the time. I couldn't sleep, and it got to the point where I went in to see my doctor, and I mean, he literally walked in the room and said, "Man, you look like absolute crap." And I did, and I felt like it. And that's when he said something to me that will always stick with me, and I'll always cherish the fact that he did this for me because it kind of changed my thinking. He said, "I understand that you want to be off of medications, but at the same time, you have to sleep. And the fact that you're not sleeping at this point, the anxiety is affecting you very, very negatively, and it's just flat out not good for your health. So at this point, I think we need to consider getting on a medication to help you sleep, but we'll make sure it's something that's not going to alter your state of mind." And that's when I got on a new medication, and then we added a few more medications later on and kind of got everything leveled out. And now I feel like we got everything right where I want it. I'm really happy with where we're at. And so um, this is kind of where, when I started to see that turning point, things started to get better. This is kind of where I started to really realize some things that I think had been just kind of hidden because I had been numb from the medication for so long. And so as I started to feel things and see things and learn how to deal with anxiety, um, things really started to change for me. So um, through some experimentation, I discovered that extremely strict and disciplined sleeping, eating, and exercise routines. So getting back to these routines, that was the only thing that I could personally do that kept my nervous system under control. Right. So being off the medications, my nervous system was going absolutely nuts. I couldn't calm down. The irritability at that point got worse than it ever was. I was miserable. There were many nights my wife and I had conversations that we had to really consider, do you need to get back on medication? Because I was just so miserable. I was so irritable that, at night we hang out with our girls and we snuggle in the bed and all that before bed. And they couldn't snuggle me. They couldn't touch me for a long time, for about 3 or 4 months. Nobody could touch me at night. I was just so irritable all the time. And that's when we added another medication, and it kind of helped tone down my nervous system a little bit more. But the biggest effect I felt on being able to tone down my nervous system is building those routines. And so I'm going to get into that in a little while about why I believe that's helped me so much. And this is the part that I really hope you guys can relate to, because I think if you can get this point, there's some things you can start changing about your lifestyle and your habits that can start to turn your life around and make some crazy changes. So, as I begin to set into this new kind of healthy lifestyle, I noticed I was more relaxed, more patient, more calm. And this is, just to be clear, this is after I began to get really, really strict with everything, excessive preparing for everything when it comes to fitness. Okay. So it calmed me down a lot. I was less irritable, I was less stressed. Up until recently, these were just kind of like some interesting benefits that I noticed. And then a few weeks ago, it really kind of changed. Well, really, a few months ago, it kind of changed for me, and I started to recognize some things about what was really going on here that I want to talk about. So, as I said earlier, a while back, I was driving and kind of thinking about all the miserable, irritable drivers that I was mentioning. Um, and it just hit me that this new lifestyle that I was leading, being extremely strict with everything when it comes to fitness, was essentially curing my anxiety. Now, I don't say that to say that, if you struggle with anxiety, you start working on all these things and it's going to cure your anxiety. But that's what I noticed with my personal situation is it's like my anxiety was kind of just going away. It's still there and I still manage it and deal with it, but it's so much easier now. And I believe I've kind of figured out exactly why that is happening. So um, let me make sure I don't miss anything here.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so I want to
if I
talk
could,
about OCD. So this is an issue that's I would say my uh, biggest condition, if you want to call it that affects my life is the OCD, and it's something that I recognized at a young age, and I've always seen it as a weakness. This A lot of you guys may relate to this constant obsessive thinking all the time that never shuts down. I've always seen that as a weakness. It's always frustrated me. It's always made me feel like I'm not normal. I'm not like everybody else because there's no way anybody else can be thinking like this obsessively, right? And so um, I think the OCD is where I really started to realize some things. So based on all these realizations, all these things that I'm starting to see as I start this new lifestyle, here's kind of what I believe is happening in my life. And this is something I think can really help some people. Um, by obsessively preparing, so um, by obsessively preparing, I'm satisfying my need to be prepared for any situation. And by obsessively preparing, what I mean is I'm a little extreme with it. Nobody needs to be this extreme, but I prepare my clothes for the next day. I prepare my medications for the next day. They're in medicine cups, out in very specific spots, ready to go for the morning. Um, Down to having a water bottle next to both of those, so they're ready to go. I prepare my gym bag. I prepare what shoes I'm going to wear the next day. My toothbrush is out and ready to go. I mean, everything. My food for the next day has to be in a specific spot. My pre workout and post workout drinks are already in the containers put next to my lunchbox. So I'm talking really extreme, obsessive preparing. Now, for me, that's worked because again, it's satisfying that urge to obsessively be prepared for everything. And the result of that is it makes me a lot easier for me to stay committed because everything is always ready to go. It's not difficult for me to um, get my things ready to go to the gym and get a workout in because it's already ready. All I have to do is grab it and jump in the car and go to work, and I'm there and I have everything that I need to do it. And so it's made it easier for me to stay committed with everything because it's ready to go. Same thing with meal planning. It's a lot easier for me to stay on my meal plan because my meals are already prepared in containers. All I have to do is take them out the fridge and eat them. And so, um, another result that I've noticed is far less stress and anxiety because I know what to expect for me every hour of the day. My entire day, hour by hour, is scheduled out. I know every single thing that's going to happen throughout that entire day. Now, that's not to say it always goes that way. Of course, I have clients that cancel, reschedule, things change, but it's a lot easier for me to adapt to that when I know what to expect and I'm not already stressed out about not having my day under control. And then a client cancels, and then I just fly off the handle because I'm overwhelmed with everything. Um, so the being ready and knowing what to expect has just lowered my stress levels. It's lowered my anxiety levels. Um, I believe this has caused me to struggle less with depression because I don't feel like I'm constantly overwhelmed trying to sort out all the crazy scattered thoughts in my head. It's like I've used the OCD that I thought was a problem. I've used it to my benefit now. I've used it to develop my life into being someone that can be consistent and committed and disciplined, which are all things that I've never been able to do. And so I've turned that weakness into a strength. And I think that's what a lot of people need to do is stop looking at this as a weakness and figure out a way to make it work. Figure out a way to work it into your life, work it into your lifestyle, and get some benefits out of it. My health has improved like I never imagined it could just because I've started using that OCD. Now, for me, it was a little bit easier, I think, than most because I was not getting back on medication. I absolutely refused. So I kind of forced myself into it. I had to figure out something to do with that OCD. I had to learn how to build some routines that allowed me to obsessively prepare without overwhelming myself. And that took some time. It took a few months for me to kind of get all my routines in order where I felt like I wasn't stressed out trying to figure everything out all the time. Um, so again, I am still on some medications, but I've just decided that I don't want to be on any medication that alters my state of mind because I think I've figured out how to deal with everything with the scattered thoughts and the OCD. I've kind of gotten all of that under control. Um, the again the OCD tendencies have been actually very useful and ironically has enabled me to stay disciplined and consistent for a long time now with my health. And I truly believe on this path, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to continue getting in better shape and really taking care of my health. Um, again, I believe that we need to find a balance of medical care if needed, and then using what we think of as a weakness as a strength. And that's what I want you guys to think about is, hopefully I've been able to kind of share my experiences in a way that you guys can relate to and you guys can use some of these things to start making some changes in your life. I cannot stress enough the importance of routines in your life for your mental health, for your emotional health, for your relational health, and obviously for your fitness. The routines are where it's at. That's the part that I believe every client I work with is missing. And that's what I try to build in my clients is routines, starting with their workouts and then adding meal plans and then adding cardio routines. It's, it's in my mind, it's the only way anybody can ever become truly happy is to have very strict, structured routines. I think that's the key to a lot of this stuff. Um, so, just one more time, I want to state this. I am by no means saying that this type of lifestyle is a cure. However, I do believe that everyone can benefit from leading a more structured lifestyle. And that's not just people that struggle with diagnosed anxiety or depression. That's another point that I wanted to make on here is I believe everybody struggles with it. It may or may not be diagnosed, and our opinions on whether it should or shouldn't be diagnosed are kind of irrelevant for this podcast episode. It just doesn't matter. I think everybody struggles with some form of anxiety and stress, and I think a lot of people, if not everybody, at some point in their life struggles with some level of depression that they need to figure out how to cope with. And so I think these things that we're talking about here can be helpful for anybody. I think everybody needs to start building a little bit more structure. Um, try it for a few months and see what happens and watch the difference you're going to see in your stress levels, your ability to be present when you're at home. That's something that's been life changing for me. I've never been able to be present when I was at home fully, um, because I was always so in my head about everything. And now that everything is organized and structured and I have everything under control, when I'm home and I can be with my kids and I can hang out and talk to my wife and kids and with my parents. It's a different life. It's a lot happier life than I've ever had before. And I truly hope some of this stuff helps you guys kind of develop that same thing. I think everybody can benefit from changing their lifestyle in some of the ways that I have. So, um, if you are kind of in this situation and you listen to this and you're thinking, man, that all sounds awesome. I want to try that out. If you're ready to kind of take that step and ready to take control of your life, reach out to me. Obviously, the very first step I'm going to tell you to take is go see your doctor, get their information, and then decide what you want to do about that end of things. Once you have a diagnosis and you have a decision on what you want to do with your doctor, then you can come in and see me and we'll start looking at making some of these other changes, either as an alternative if that's what you decide, or as an enhancement to what you're already doing with your doctor. I think either way it can be extremely beneficial. So all my contact info will be in the description as always, so please reach out, you guys. And just another thing I want to mention one more time is, if you are struggling with depression, like we talked about earlier, you're not the only one. There's a lot of people out there. Talk to somebody. Don't keep it in your head and keep it all balled up and let it destroy your life. Get out there and talk to somebody. I completely understand it's hard. It's very hard for me. This is one of the toughest podcast episodes I've done yet, just because it's still hard for me to talk about this stuff. But you got to do it. You got to get out there and take that step and talk to somebody. So just wanted to mention that. Um, Again, I hope everything I've shared with you guys really helps you guys kind of see some things. I really hope it gets a lot of you to realize that maybe you need to take a look at your lifestyle and slow down a little bit, and work on your mental health. There's so many people I see out there that are just not happy. And we're running ourselves into the ground. We're destroying our health. We're killing ourselves with stress. We're absolutely killing ourselves. I'm a firm believer in the fact that most medical conditions as we get older can be related to stress in our life earlier before that. So get control of it before it's too late. And I truly believe that it will allow you to live a much happier, healthier, and longer life. All right, guys. One last thing I want to mention, and then we're going to close it out, is if any of you guys have a lot of experience with this, especially if you have gotten into fitness and you noticed a difference, I would love to have you on a podcast episode to share your story. Um, I think it could be really helpful for you, and I think it could be really helpful for others out there struggling with that, um, to hear stories from other people that have been through this stuff. The more we get out here and talk, the more we can actually help people that are struggling with these things. So thank you guys so much for listening to our story. Unfortunately, it looks like Dylan got kicked out for some reason, but we'll get him back on here soon. Hope you guys have a great week. Until then, slow down your life a little bit and relax. Y'all have a great day. Bye bye.